When we talk about human evolution, um, the picture in our heads is usually fixed way back, like millennia ago.
Right. We tend to think it's all ancient history.
Exactly. We sort of assume modern humans are the finished article and that the whole process has pretty much ground to a halt. But the research we're looking at today really throws that whole assumption out the window.
It certainly challenges it.
Yeah, it suggests that evolution, really localized, maybe even rapid evolution is happening, right now, driven by some pretty intense environmental pressures. So our mission today is a deep dive into this really compelling recent study. It focuses on the Turkana people up in northwestern Kenya.
Okay.
And we want to unpack the evidence that suggests this group is, well, actively undergoing genetic adaptation, adapting to thrive in what sounds like one of the toughest environments on the planet.
Yeah.
We're not just asking if evolution is still happening, but maybe how fast and how specific it can be in, like, reshaping human biology.
And that's really significant, isn't it? Because it kind of recalibrates our whole time scale for human evolution.
How so?
Well, we're just so used to thinking in these vast stretches of time, hundreds of thousands of years.
Right.
Deep time. Exactly. But this research, it's basically telling us that human biology might still be incredibly plastic, capable of making real genetic adjustments surprisingly quickly, maybe just over a handful of generations, when it's facing constant, intense pressure from the environment.
Okay, so let's unpack this then, starting with this setting, the environment that's acting as this pressure. Who exactly are the Turkana people and what makes their home so demanding?
Sure. So the Turkana are a pastoralist community. They live in the region around Lake Turkana in Kenya, like you said. And geographically, that area is just defined by, well, extreme heat and really chronic dryness.
We're not just talking hot, are we?
No. The sources stress this. It's a hyper-arid climate. Temperatures routinely go over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius, and the rainfall is notoriously low and very unpredictable.
Wow, so the pressure isn't just sort of general hardship. It's very specific physiological stress.
Precisely.
The body constantly having to fight to maintain its core temperature, keep hydrated day after day. That sounds immense.
It is. And then you add their lifestyle. Being pastoralists, they rely heavily on their livestock, camels, goats, cattle.
Right.
Which means their diet can swing wildly, oscillating between times of real scarcity and then periods where milk or maybe meat are relatively available.
Okay, so metabolic stress on top of heat and water stress.
Exactly. That combination, metabolic and hydration stress, that's the key. When we say harsh environment here, we mean a system that really selects for exceptional efficiency, primarily in two areas, managing body heat and managing hydration and nutrition, especially during these cycles of drought and potential famine.
So the individuals who thrive, who survive and reproduce successfully.
They're likely the ones whose bodies are just better tuned for it, maybe needing less water or being better at extracting energy from what can often be pretty low-quality food under stress.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What did the researchers actually find when they looked closer? They didn't just observe, right? They looked at the genetics.
That's the core finding, yes. The study suggests, and we should probably keep that word in mind.
Okay, suggests. Good point.
It suggests that the Turkana people show signs of being genetically adapted, specifically to live in this demanding place.
So what does genetically adapted actually mean in practical terms here? Like, what's the implication?
Well, conceptually, it means that the unique pressures of their environment, the heat, the dryness, the diet, seem to have favored specific genetic traits over time.
Traits that help them manage the physical demands better.
Exactly. Traits that improve their chances of survival and maintaining health under those extreme conditions. It implies these aren't just random variations. They're changes driven by natural selection in that specific location.
So this is kind of the aha moment then. This isn't ancient history playing out over millennia.
Potentially not, no.
It's relatively rapid, localized human evolution happening, almost in response to immediate ecological challenges. That's pretty profound.
It is, and the methodology they likely used helps support this.
Right. How do they actually measure this? How do you see evolution in action like that?
Well, the study didn't just look at the Turkana by themselves. That's key. It's the comparative approach that makes it powerful.
Comparing them to who?
Likely methods such as genome-wide association studies or GWS, comparing the frequencies of specific genetic variants, alleles in the Turkana population against those in neighboring genetically related groups.
Ah, okay. Like who?
Maybe groups like the Samburu or Maasai, for example, who might live nearby, but perhaps in slightly less extreme environments, or maybe settled in the region more recently.
So you're looking for genetic outliers, basically. Specific gene versions that are way more common in the Turkana than in these related groups.
Exactly. You're hunting for those non-random differences that seem to line up with the environmental challenge.
Because if a particular gene version is super common only in the Turkana, the implication is that it gives them some kind of edge.
A distinct survival advantage, yes, specifically in that landscape. It suggests selection has favored that particular variant there.
Right. And did they find specific candidates? What adaptations did the study actually suggest?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting, focusing right in on physiology. The sources suggest they found these high-frequency genetic markers, things called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism, in gene regions that are associated with two main areas: kidney function, renal function, and also how the body processes fats, lipid metabolism.
Okay, let's break those down. Kidney function and fat metabolism. Why would those be the biological hotspots for adaptation in a hot, dry place like Turkana?
Well, think about the kidneys first. If you're constantly battling dehydration and high heat, your ability to conserve water is absolutely critical for survival right now.
Yeah.
So really efficient kidney function means you can maintain your body's salt and water balance, your electrolyte balance, and importantly, minimize how much water you lose through urine.
So the genes are potentially helping them make, like, super concentrated urine.
That's the suggestion, an adaptation that makes their kidneys particularly good at reclaiming water. It might go beyond the typical range of human variation, a specific optimization driven by that constant water scarcity.
Okay, that's one part. What about the lipid metabolism, the fat processing?
Well, that ties into the pastoralist lifestyle, those feast or famine cycles we talked about.
Ah, right. The variable diet.
Yeah. How your body handles fats, storing them, using them, is crucial for managing energy through those periods. So a genetic adaptation here could mean, perhaps, a better ability to efficiently store energy when food, like milk, is plentiful.
And
then, crucially, being able to effectively mobilize those stored fats for energy during the lean times, the droughts or shortages. It could help sustain them metabolically when others might, well, falter.
This really shifts the conversation, doesn't it? It goes beyond just saying, oh, they're tough people.
Absolutely.
It suggests their actual internal biochemistry down at the genetic level might be specifically optimized for living there.
Exactly. And that, in turn, gives us a powerful clue about the speed of this kind of change.
How so?
Because when you see these specific gene variants at such high frequencies in the population, it implies the selective pressure, the environmental challenge, must have been pretty severe and consistent.
Right. Strong pressure leads to faster change.
Potentially, yes. Enough pressure over a relatively short evolutionary timescale, maybe hundreds or perhaps a few thousand years, to rapidly savor these genes and make them common, maybe even fix them in the Turkana population.
Okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture then. How does a finding like the Turkana study change our general understanding of human evolution? Because like we said at the start, many people think adaptation mostly stopped with things like, I don't know, height or skin color.
Well, if we look broadly, the Turkana findings really reinforce the idea that localized, specialized evolution hasn't stopped. It might actually be the norm, not the exception.
Do you give other examples?
Sure. Think about lactose tolerance, the ability to digest milk into adulthood. That's another relatively rapid evolutionary change, and it's strongly linked to populations that adopted dairy farming, pastoralism.
Right, and it's concentrated in specific regions like Northern Europe and parts of Africa.
Precisely. It's not universal. It arose where there was a strong selective advantage to digesting milk. The Turkana study suggests a similar powerful force, but driven more by climate and hydration stress, the geography itself, rather than just diet alone.
So it helps paint a picture of human diversity.
As not just sort of historical accidents, but as ongoing successful biological solutions to very specific geographical problems. You've got populations like Tibetans with gene variants like EPAS1, adapted to high-altitude, low-oxygen environments. You have Inuit populations with adaptations related to processing high-fat marine diets. And now, this suggested adaptation in the Turkana for dealing with extreme heat and water stress. Each environmental niche seems to carve out its own selective pressures.
So I think the big takeaway here for you, the listener, is this idea of resilience being literally woven into our genome in response to place. It's not just an academic point. It gives you a really deep appreciation for how our physical makeup, our biology, is profoundly shaped by the landscapes we inhabit.
It does.
When we look at different populations around the world, we're essentially seeing these living maps of biological problem solving,
Yeah.
all driven by environmental challenges.
Absolutely. And this is where the critical thinking comes back in. We have to remember that nuance.
The suggests part.
Exactly. The study suggests this adaptation. It's a strong inference based on finding correlations between how common certain genes are and the known environmental pressures. But scientists are usually, and rightly, cautious.
Cautious about calling it definitively proven adaptation.
Right. Ideally, you'd want more direct evidence, maybe a longitudinal study showing those specific gene variants directly lead to better survival or reproductive outcomes in that environment, which is, of course, incredibly difficult to do in humans.
So what are the main alternative explanations
Yeah.
or, confounding factors they'd have to rule out before saying, yes, this is definitely genetic adaptation?
Well, a key challenge is always distinguishing true genetic adaptation from what we call phenotypic plasticity.
Which is?
That's the body's ability to adjust or acclimatize during an individual's lifetime without any underlying genetic change. So, for instance, do the Turkana just get really good at handling heat because they grow up in acclimatization? Or is there a genuine hardwired genetic difference making them inherently better at it?
How do they try to separate those?
The comparative genetics, the GWS, helps a lot. Finding those specific SNPs at high frequency only in the population facing the unique pressure strongly points towards genetics. But critics will always look at other possibilities, like complex migration histories, maybe gene flow from other groups in the past, or even specific cultural practices that might buffer the environmental stress and mimic a genetic advantage.
Could you give example of that?
Sure. Maybe, hypothetically, if the Turkana historically had unique knowledge of or access to certain shaded areas or specific water sources that neighboring groups didn't, that kind of cultural or localized behavioral edge could potentially complicate the interpretation of the genetic signature.
Okay.
But the strength of this study, again, seems to rely on the statistical significance of those S&P differences, especially since they map so directly onto really fundamental biological pathways, kidney function, energy metabolism. That makes the genetic explanation quite compelling.
That distinction, hardwired genetic adaptation versus just getting used to it, the acclimatization that's really crucial for understanding what the data might mean.
It is.
And the fact that the signals are so specific, tied to kidney and lipid function, really does build a strong case for actual evolutionary change being written into their code, doesn't it?
Well, it makes a very plausible case, yes.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up our deep dive here, the Turkana study really stands out as this potent modern example of human genetic adaptation that's both rapid, relatively speaking, and highly localized. Driven by these intense chronic challenges of the Kenyan desert environment, it shows our species is still diversifying, still specializing biologically, right down to the microscale. It really drives home that the age of human evolution is, well, far from over.
Absolutely. And that leads us right into a final thought, something for you to mull over.
Okay.
If specific localized environments can still shape our genetics so profoundly and potentially so quickly, well, we really have to turn that lens inward, towards us now.
Yeah.
Consider the massive environmental shifts happening globally right now. Think about the huge move towards high-density urban living. Think about our drastically changed diets, high sugar, highly processed foods becoming the norm for many. Think about constant exposure to new chemicals, pollutants.
These are all new selective pressures, aren't they?
They certainly could be. So the question becomes, what are the genetic pressures acting on us collectively right now in this rapidly changing global environment? What novel adaptations, if any, might be quietly emerging in human populations in the 21st century, driven by these new challenges? What's shaping